Hello, buddy. I am aware this video is probably well overdue. Um, so, Rochester told us that I needed a new liver. So then, at the time, they thought it was going to be a deceased donor. Well, then, about a week later, they called us back and said, nope, we're going to be able to do a living donor. So I thought that was going to be better because up in Rochester, they seemed like you were basically on your deathbed before you get a liver. So then they had all my appointments set up, and then they decided that my insurance is not one of the 13 in-network transplant insurances that they work with. So they sent me back to Iowa City. I fought and fought and fought that. But insurance is insurance, and so I ended up going back to Iowa City. In the meantime, I worked on building a group of people mainly people whose children have had Abernathy. There are 3 adults. One's 22, one's 32, and one's me. Other than that, there's 17, 18 other members there's 14, 15 other members whose children have had Abernathy. So, talking through all this with everybody, they just kept saying, go to Superina. Well, when I talked to the doctor in Rochester about it, he says, well, Superina deals with type 2 Abernathy. That is where one of the 2 veins that make up your portal vein is blocked. You have type 1, which means the whole portal vein is blocked. So, Superina won't do anything for you. So then I got talking to these mothers who told me that most of their children were originally misdiagnosed with type 1 when in fact they had type 2, and that Superina, from what I understand, doesn't believe there is a type 1. He believes that they're all just misdiagnosed type 2s. Of course, there's not very many of these that ever happen. So, he's seen quite a few of them, though. He's the guy to go to. So, I went to Iowa City for the liver transplant appointments. And the first day was all testing. MRIs, how far can you walk in 6 minutes, yada yada. Second day, I sat down at a table with 4 or 5 other people and their support people, whatever. And we were all talking about transplants. I was talking about a liver. Everybody else was getting a kidney. That was a tough room to be in. That was a lot of tough news. They take your immunity down to nothing. Then you're susceptible to everything, infection. Apparently your immune system fights off cancer, which was about the point where I was like, oh no. So then I met with they took me into a room by myself, and I met with a hepatologist who's a liver doctor specializing in transplants. He asked me what I understood about it. So I told him everything. Kind of a lot of the stuff I've been telling you guys. including this new procedure that I found out about that Dr. Superina does called the ligation of the portostemmic shunt, where he slowly clamps off the shunt that you have. Apparently he clamps it down, then goes back in 3 months, makes sure everything's going fine, clamps it down more. Because there are veins there. There may or may not be blockage, but the shunt is the path of least resistance, which is why your blood is taking that path. But if he clamps that down, that forces the blood to go somewhere else. And these veins do seem to be there on most people. It's just that the blood isn't flowing through them. Which is why on CT scans they can't see it, because that solution only it goes in the blood and it goes through the blood. So if there's no blood going through those veins, then there's no way they can get a picture in those veins. Anyhow, I explained this all to him and to Dr. Superina, and he was really impressed. He's like, wow, you know stuff. I don't ever run into people who know stuff. Apparently nobody else. And I said, well, I'm kind of invested in this whole thing because I've been dealing with it for probably not as long as these people, but it's unusual and I don't really want to transplant either. So then he put me, then he left. He said he was going to look into this stuff. And the surgeon came in. The surgeon came into the room. Pretty much one of the first things he said was, I don't take out good livers. I take out nasty, crusty, cirrhosis-filled livers. Your liver is good. So here's what I want to do. He's got this idea of a Rex shunt, where he builds a shunt between your portal vein and where your umbilical cord attached to your liver somehow. I'm really not a doctor, but anyhow. So he wanted to do this Rex shunt, and I was, well, gosh, okay, that sounds cool. Check this out. And so I was telling him about Dr. Superina and his ligation process. And he says, well, Superina, yeah, I know him. He's the one I consult with him all the time. He's the one that invented this other process that I want to do. And I was like, well, cool, because I'm trying to get a referral to go see him. And he says, well, if you can see him, he is the man. Otherwise, I would be more than willing to do your procedure and have Superina consult with, over the phone or however they do that. So that was all good news. And like I say, I left that. Oh, and he was very comfortable doing my procedure because this connective tissue deal that I have actually makes this all a lot easier, because he says, a lot of people, when we get in there, we're cutting through 4 to 8 inches of fat, muscle, whatever it be. He says, no, all the stuff we need to work on you, it's all right there, right on top. So he was pretty stoked about that. He explained that both of these procedures are kind of risky. They're both pretty experimental. If either one of them were to go wrong, there's a good possibility that I would need a transplant right then. But it's options. they're also very young procedures, as far as I believe maybe 5 and 6 or 7 years that they've used these. So nobody has any idea what the long-term effect is. But I still see it as a better option than a liver transplant, because all the transplant doctors do too. But they pretty much told me, well, actually he told me point blank, you're going to outlive this first liver. And then it's another one, and another one, and another one. And the first one is easy. First one should be no problem. You got a healthy liver, everything in, you're healthy, But the second or third one is not going to be that case. That liver is going to die in 10 to 15 years. So that was quite a scare. But like I say, the hope of one of these other processes working is a lot more than anybody else in that room had. I mean, I was in a room with people who have no other option but to get a transplant. Even though theirs are only kidneys and mine is a liver, it's still a lot to face. So we are trying to get we've been in contact. I've sent Dr. Superina my charts. It's just a matter of waiting to hear what we get back. In the meantime, about this connective tissue disease, so they checked Marfan. Well, they actually did a full genetic testing of me. Well, you don't have Marfan. Then they checked the rest of it. And the mutation came back on a gene that I can't remember the name of right now, that directly associates with Loeys-Dietz, which is a connective tissue disease kind of like Marfan. But when they got this result, they found out that it's not Loeys-Dietz. It's some other mutation that they've never seen before. And apparently genetics is constantly, it's a changing field. It's something they've only been able to do for a few years now. So I guess they're going to see, but the aneurysms are still probably caused by the genetic tissue disorder, whatever that may be. And last time I recorded this, it was like a 20-minute thing, so I cannot figure out why we're getting so little out of it. But the confusion I figured out by joining a bunch of cirrhosis groups, that it's called HE and it's hepatic endo something. So if you talk to me and I'm a little out of it, or I don't make sense, or I say something kind of off balance, why, that's what it is. I guess my last bit is the donation. Being a organ donor, we lost my father-in-law. I want to say 3 years ago, but that doesn't feel right. It feels like it's 4 years. Anyhow, and he was an organ donor, and we got all the letters back from all the different places where his organs had helped people. And I have gone online to organdonors.com or something like that. I don't know what it's called. But, and signed up to be an organ donor. And then you want to let your friends and family know that you have done that. Also, it's something you can check on your license. And it doesn't seem like a big deal to you and me. Well, at least before. But you're not going to need them when you're dead. And they will make sure you're dead before they take them out. But, you can literally save somebody's life. And that's huge. Oh, that's the other part I was missing. Is that in Rochester you were going to have to be on your deathbed to get an organ. Especially a liver. But Iowa is in a different region. We compete with different hospitals like Nebraska, Missouri, where University of Iowa is kind of one of the big ones. And the doctor said, if you need a liver, we can get you a liver. That's not a big deal. Livers are apparently very easily obtained in Iowa. Not so much in Chicago, Rochester, because they compete with Minneapolis, Madison, I don't know, a bunch of ones. But they weren't worried about getting me a liver. They were worried about saving the one that I have. But I encourage all of you to, if you're not a organ donor yet, become one, because it is literally save a life, if not 2 or 3. I think my father-in-law gave bone marrow and skin to 12 different individuals, and the ability, even though he had glasses and horrible eyesight, he gave sight to 2 people. So, you're not going to need it. And it's a blessing for those that do receive it. So, something to think about. I encourage you all to do. Alright, well, that's all I have for now. Thank you very much. Bye.